Yeah, I know. Hi, Cindy. And who intends to start on the knit along? Either your own project or the baby size sweater? Okay, great, awesome. So we've got quite a few different people and different levels of interest. So today, what we're going to do in terms of the knit along is take a look at where to find all the information to participate, discuss a little bit about the different information you need to put in to generate your own sweater, and some of the very, very first techniques you'll need to use to get started. So let's get going with that, because we try and keep it to about an hour here. Or Frank tries, so, and I get long-winded. It's a bad habit of mine. So this is the little baby sweater. It's called Happy Baby, and you can find it on Phrancko.com on the homepage. If you scroll down the sort of descriptions of what the website does, you can find a copy of this pattern to download under sample pattern. If you'd like to follow along with it, if you're new to the program, maybe someone could put a link to it in the chat in case you don't have it. You can take a look at it, you can download and follow along and see what a pattern looks like. The patterns that you generate will come in this same format. The patterns all look like this, with embedded QR codes that go to Frank's technique videos. The stages of the pattern all come in the same order, assuming you've gotten a crew neck, which is what we're focusing on. There are 4 neck options. We are focusing on the crew neck for these purposes. There you go. Thank you, Sue. There's a PDF you can download. So if you once you put in your own sizes, whether you're making it for yourself or someone else, this is what your pattern will look like, but with your appropriate measurements and stitch counts, etc. Also, for the sake of completion, while we're doing this here, something I'm going to be doing is compiling questions that are asked for people who are participating, or even people who are just curious while the knit along is going. And we'll be putting FAQs and any sort of handouts or graphics we make related to this in the Phrancko forums on Ravelry. That is where most of the asynchronous communication, I should say, that's where all of the asynchronous communication that's Phrancko related happens. So if you have not seen that, if you're on the Phrancko website, there is a bar at the top of the website. Let me look at it to make sure I'm telling you the truth. Yes, the bar at the top of the website, there is a link that says forum, and that will take you directly to the Ravelry forum for Phrancko sweater knitters. So you can join that, ask questions. We have a thread in there that's for Zoom meetings and spring/summer knit along. So after our meetings, you can look at that, and if questions come up or you're having trouble, it's not like an emergency, no, they're emergencies, you can post in there and have discussions and share your progress. So has everyone had a chance to see that? Do you find a link to that?
Mm-hmm.
Someone could also kindly put that into the chat if we'd like, but it's right there linked on the website. So those of you who are sort of curious about the knit along and are here sort of informationally, would anyone like to share what drew you to it?
I'm happy to start.
Please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm in England and it's very late at night here. Suzanne told me about it, and I think you did too, Ron. I've inquired with you about something, and I can't even remember what, and you told me about this. And funny enough, I've seen Phrancko on a Discovery Channel program. So all these things joined together, and I was just curious.
Good.
I started knitting last year when I was stuck up in a Norwegian mountain for 6 months during the lockdown, and spent a small fortune in a local yarn store. Fine.
As a local artist,
but I've been hooked, and
we appreciate that.
It's my saving grace. It saved my bacon. That's all I can say.
Great. That's wonderful.
I met Phrancko up at Three Rivers when he joined us at a workshop. And he wore a different sweater every day, one that he'd knit, and they were beautiful. So that's how I know him. He probably doesn't remember me, but that's okay.
Excellent. So the beauty of this, and I'm sure many of you have found this at this point, is that Phrancko.com allows you to create a sweater for anybody, and anybody's body using any yarn you'd like. And there are some places where you get into pushing the envelope. The website does have some tolerances built in, but Frank has been very good. The first sweater I knit for myself was knit at a whopping 10 stitches over 4 inches. And the generator wasn't quite sure what to make of it at first, but Frank stepped in and got it. And it's a perfect fit on quite a huge person at quite a huge gauge. So if you do have a large body, it will accommodate you, which is great for someone like myself who often finds that commercial patterns or even like amateur designed patterns that you'd find on Ravelry or Pinterest or what have you aren't great for me. And many sweaters aren't well designed for men in the first place. And these definitely are because they're perfectly custom. So let's see. What do I have to speak about next? Let me look at my outline here. The sweater patterns themselves, beyond being a custom fit sweater that the website can generate, are also special because of the construction, which Phrancko has named Phrancko's set-in sleeves. What is that? What you call them? That's what they are.
I add the word seamless, so it's actually
seamless.
Phrancko's seamless set-in sleeves. It's a mouthful, but that's what I like to call it. Phrancko's seamless set-in sleeves.
Set-in sleeves. And what is special about this construction is that only the very, very tops of the sweaters, I'm talking exclusively about the crew neck right now. The other necklines vary in some ways, but the crew neck we're focusing on, only the very, very tops of the shoulders are knit flat. The rest of the pullover is knit entirely in the round, which means a few things. A, it's very easy to look at and to work on. Traditional set-in sleeve sweaters are knit flat in generally 4 pieces and then seamed together. And many people, quite reasonably in my mind, aren't crazy about seaming. Some people love it, but I'm assuming maybe you would be happy to knit a sweater with set-in sleeves without seaming. And that's where this particular technique excels. So because so much of the sweater is knit in the round, stripes are a breeze to incorporate. You just change yarns and the stripes are even throughout. If you put them in the sleeve caps, there they are throughout the whole body. Knitting techniques that are difficult to work flat, you don't need to worry about working flat. Stranded knitting, and like cables, traveling stitches, the Bavarian or Alpine style switches, which have cable crossings every row in some designs, are tricky to work flat. Once you have this technique down, you can put those stitch patterns into patterns you've generated, and it's a breeze. There's nothing to it because you're working on the right side of the fabric the entire time. Is there anything I'm missing in the sales pitch? You're already here, so I'm hoping you're pretty well interested, but I don't want to miss any of the great features.
One of the uniquenesses of this construction is that it has a true bell-shaped sleeve cap, even though it's knitted in the round. Barbara Walker once very briefly described this very same approach to knitting a sweater, but her sleeve did not produce a bell-shaped cap, which is required to get a really good fitting shoulder. So I improved on her technique basically by calculating where increases should go to create a bell-shaped cap.
Yes, and that you can find that the bell-shaped cap really makes the fit of this sweater, even in places where this technique is mentioned, or a similar technique is occurring. The bell shaping of the set and sleeve really makes all the difference for an excellent fit throughout the shoulder. So there you have it. That's that. Let's see who's makes it. Oh, stripes in the baby sweater. Yeah, 100 grams of each color. That's Sue in the chat makes an excellent point. She's going to put stripes in her baby sweater because of material limitations. She's only got a ball of each color, and stripes are a simple matter. So that is a good segue into talking about materials for the baby sweater. The instructions for the baby sweater call for approximately 2 skeins or 200 grams of a worsted weight yarn to be knit on, it's a US 8 needle now that it calls for in the new pattern, which is a 5mm cable or needle. I should mention, is it 6mm? Well, it's in there.
All right, I thought it was a 4mm, but I'll double check.
Oh, okay. It's in there. But I'm going to add that if you're just making the sweater as a sample, as like a sort of large scale swatch project for yourself, it's immaterial. Just use a yarn you like to work with, needles that are acceptable for the yarn's range that you enjoy, and something will come out. It will be sweater-like, and you will have learned all the techniques. So don't feel concerned that you have to go out and buy new yarn to practice making the baby sweater. If you have something at hand, it will work just fine. It is very customizable. Now, speaking of customizable, if you are making a sweater for yourself, of course, the joy is you can use whatever yarn you like with the needles that give you the fabric you like. The catch being, you must take very good measurements of the swatch that you create. The entire nature of the pattern generator hinges on getting a good, accurate measurement of the swatch. But I don't want to belabor that if we are comfortable with it. Is there anyone who needs to have a little bit of a discussion about taking good swatch measurements?
Yes, please.
All right. Do you have any specific questions about taking swatch measurements, or do you just want a quick rundown?
A quick rundown to start with, please.
Yes, ma'am. So let me grab my swatch that is properly marked, because I didn't put it in front of me when I was doing my mise en place, I guess. I'm very clever, and one of my markers has fallen out, but I can put it back in. So I just learned to use Zoom's features today. I was giving myself a tutorial. So I'm going to switch to my overhead camera, and we'll see what we can see. What do you say? Am I clearly visible to everyone? Because I'm talking. Here we go. Change to this camera.
Yes, we see that.
Hey, wonderful. So this, what you're looking at now, is the back of a sweater, the back of the baby sweater. But what we'll take a look at now is my swatch that is all marked up for measurement. This particular swatch is a swatch that I designed for use with this, with Phrancko.com, and in conjunction with the knit along. You can find a pattern for this swatch in the forums, as I mentioned. Otherwise, you can follow the directions as it says on the website and knit strips 5 to 6 inches tall and wide, or make yourself a nice 5 to 6 inch square. The more stitches, the better for getting an accurate stitch gauge. But I'm not going to make you knit 3 feet, you know, that will be more accurate, but at a certain point you get diminishing returns. So a few inches, a nice handful of inches. And you see these, I'm not even pointing at anything. You see these little threads that I put in? What those are for, rather than doing something which is traditionally how many people count gauge, putting down a ruler and then sort of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the ruler to see, and then you're like, okay, that's half a stitch, that's a third of a stitch. What we do is we place these threads in our work because we'll be able to tell how many stitches are between the threads by simply counting them. And it doesn't matter what the measurement is because we're going to measure the space between the threads. You enter that into the Phrancko website and it makes it does the algebra for you, and it tells you how many stitches that is over 4 inches. Same with the rows. I've placed markers, and then I simply count the number of rows between the markers and then measure that complete distance and enter that in where called for in the pattern generator. Is that enough of a quick rundown, or have I run it down too quickly?
I'll just point out that when you enter the measurements on the website, it expects 4 numbers. It wants to know the count between your 2 markers, which I agree with Ron should be at least 4 inches apart. You do not want to do it over 1 inch because that won't give you a perfect enough gauge. So you enter the number of stitches, and then you enter the measure in inches between those 2 markers. It's very important that you enter both the correct number and the correct measure. And then you do the same thing with the number of rows. You count the number of rows between 2 markers that are vertical, and then measure between those 2 markers. Enter the count, the row count, and the distance between those 2 markers. And then the website does the math for you. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to know that. What you really need to do is divide that number by, divide the number of stitches by the number of rows, and then the stitches by the width, and then multiply that times 4, and then you get you don't need to know any of that. You just enter the 4 numbers that it asks for. Just last week, someone said, I can't get an accurate estimate, and I don't know why it's not giving it to me. And it was because, was that you, Arlette? I can't remember. Yes. And it was because they entered the wrong measurement for the distance of the rows, I believe. So make sure you enter all 4 numbers accurately. That's the main thing. And do it over 4 to 5 inches in each direction.
Accuracy is key to getting the perfect fit that it promises you. But if you do, you will get the perfect fit that you're promised. I've made these for very different bodies, and they've all come out just great. If you're having trouble,
part of the beauty of this process is that you don't have to match somebody else's stitch gauge and row gauge, which, as you probably know, when you've tried to match that for patterns, you sometimes can match the stitch gauge, but then the row gauge is wrong. No. And for this pattern, it depends on an accurate stitch gauge and row gauge. They both have to be accurate, but you don't have to worry about matching somebody's because you're generating the gauge and putting it into the website, and then it builds the pattern around what you enter.
So the next thing I want to take a look at before we talk techniques is schematics. I don't want to take for granted that everyone has carefully looked at a schematic before, but this is the schematic that is generated. This is for myself. As you can see, I'm quite a wide boy. But I'm not shy about my measurements. That's my sweater. I know that this will fit me because when I put my information into Phrancko.com, I get to see this schematic before I make my purchase. So this is your time to make sure that the calculations have come out reasonably, that the dimensions that you put in have come out reasonably, and all of the key components of the sweater are listed on the schematic. It tells me here what the upper arm width is. It tells me here what this is across the body. I should mention that my chest is not 27.5 inches wide. That is half the width of this oversized sweater because it's the measure across when it's laid flat. So don't think that you've put in that you have a 42-inch bust and now it's telling you you're going to make a 21-inch sweater. It's half because it's flat. But it seems silly to mention, but not everyone has carefully examined a schematic before, and it really is your chance before you make the purchase to make sure that you're going to get the sweater that you intend to get. And Frank put that in for you to see before you enter information and pay for anything or buy a sweater for yourself. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Schematic looks good for everyone. Tony asks a question in chat. Do we choose ease or is it built into the pattern? You do choose ease. When you are at the point where you put in your measurements, you're given a selection. I'm going to put myself back on here. Not that the schematic isn't lovely, but I did my beard today, so I want to make sure that that wasn't wasted effort. So there are options from quite a bit of negative ease through to quite a bit of positive ease. I'm not sure what you call this, the categories, but as you look, there are check boxes, and I believe one fit is $6. Is this correct? And each additional fit is $1.
The second fit is $2, and each one after that is $1.
And after that is $1. So $8 for 2 fits, and then $1 additional for each additional fit. So you could get yourself one sweater pattern that goes from very, very tight with several inches of negative ease. I made myself, my sweater is the largest amount of positive ease because I don't need anything form-fitting. But yes, you thank you very much, Tony. I grew it myself. I should mention that the ease changes the size of the body and sleeves. It doesn't change the architecture of the shoulder, the neck, the arm length, other things that are the more weight we put on, our arms don't get longer, which many novice designers don't quite understand yet. You may have heard them referred to as gorilla arms in knitting circles. Some designers find that, if your chest is that big, surely you have enormous arms. That's not the case. As you add ease to the sweater, the part that contains your body will get larger, but the architecture of the sweater on your body will continue to fit you properly. Luann asks the size yarn for the baby sweater. It calls for worsted, number 4 medium weight yarn. As I say, whatever you have on hand that you're comfortable working with will still make something sweater shaped.
But it is not for any particular baby, so it's not a custom fit sweater, which misses the point of the website, of course.
It may fit some baby somewhere in the world, but you'll have to do like a Cinderella thing and try it on people's babies, and maybe not right now. Have I raised any new questions for anyone?
Yes, Fatima asked if the pattern can be modified to be a cardigan instead of
You bring in my cardigan?
Top down. I mean, a screw
Not
or
only
whatever.
is the answer to that yes, I've got an example. It's on the floor right in here. So I think there are 2 options. What I did, on the sweater that I'm having my lovely assistant bring in now is I knit the sweater in the round and steeked it. You see this? Let's pull it off the mannequin. This was knit in the, please excuse that the buttons are all crooked. They're tied, they're tacked on with string and not actually attached. I promise I can sew on a button if I try. But this was knit, completely in the round because stranded knitting is easy. And then I steeked it. So if you look at the inside, there's where I cut my fabric. That's what that means to steek, by the way. I shouldn't assume everyone knows this. I knit the sweater in the round and cut it. The other suggestion that comes to mind, if you would like a cardigan, there is a Henley neckline available on the site. And there would be nothing stopping you from just not closing the placket and continuing to knit the Henley downward flat. Can you think of anything else, Frank?
I keep having to find the mute button. It takes me a second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is exactly what I thought. Yeah.
So yes, I should mention that customizations like this, like the stranded knit cardigan I've made, the pattern is infinitely customizable, but the pattern you get is a baseline crew neck cardigan without body shaping. Those are all customizations you will need to make for yourself, which is daunting for some people and beautifully freeing for others. I like to just be able to go crazy, but it does just make a body. So something that I'm working on now, if you are, if you have, breasts and you're concerned about the fit, either it makes the front of your sweaters rise up if you're a quite busty person. I'm working on a module that will add princess dart shaping, and I'll see if I can share that with you online. But when taking your measurements, it's important to take your measurements from your upper chest, because the chest measurement determines the architecture of the shoulders, everything that is the fit of the sweater. If you are a busty person, you do not necessarily want to take the measurement at your full bust, because you could find that your sweaters are very, very large for yourself. So what can you do if you want to make sure that they fit? Ease can be your friend. If you have a large cup size, if you are an A cup, a B cup, depending on the size of your bra band, even if a C cup potentially, you might not need any shaping. And you might be able to just wear the sweater as is because stockinette fabric stretches. If you have a larger cup size, you may find that using the ease to make your sweater can get you over the hump, I guess I should say.
I'd also like to point out that if you intentionally choose a larger ease because you want a larger bust size, then you may notice when you see the schematic that the arm circumference up here has also been increased, and you may not want it to be that large. So the way to fix it is to back up and change your measurement and take inches off of your upper arm circumference. You don't have to tell the truth when you do the measurements, put the measurements in. You tell it what you need to tell it to get it to produce the sweater size that you want. So you can use a larger ease, and that will give you the right shoulder width and the fit at the top of the sweater that you want. Give a larger ease, and then go and tell it that you've got smaller arms than your actual measurement, so that it gets the arm circumference back down to where you want it to be.
I did this for a crop top that I made for one of my housemates, and there was no reason for me to do it other than I wanted to see if I could put in a negative number to see what would happen. I'm kind of a pest. But literally I told it that I wanted the hem to be -8 inches because I was making a crop top, and it did it. It gave me a sweater with, and told me to stop knitting 8 inches too early. And the crop was exactly the way I wanted it. So you can lie, but it will make the sweater that you ask it for, which is really, really cool. Do you want to talk about some of the earliest techniques you'll need to make the sweater
Yes.
at that point? Okay. So let's get another sort of show of hands to see who's frightened by what or who hasn't tried what technique. Give me a nice wavy hand if you have never done short rows and you just have no idea about them. Okay. So most of us are fairly comfortable with the idea of short rows. All right, I won't spend an incredible amount of time on short rows. All they are is not knitting all the way to the end of the row, turning your work and working back. You'll have to do something to catch the stitch right after you turn, or you'll get a gap. And Frank suggests in the pattern something called wrap and turn short rows. Frank, is it correct that you have a video tutorial about wrap and turn, or is that something you don't have?
I don't have a video on
Okay.
wrap and turn. There are lots of videos on it, but I would like to point out that if this whole process of wrap and turn or any short rows is bothering you, it's also possible to just leave them out. It only occurs on row 2 of the front and row 2 of the back. And instead of doing the short rows, take that whole complicated row and just knit it across or purl it across, whichever direction it starts in. Just keep going to the other, and the sweater will still fit. It will still be fine. In fact, another of my favorite teachers is Arinda Holliday, who's also the editor of the Cast On magazine. She says she never does the shoulder shaping anymore. She's found out it doesn't really matter to her.
There you have it.
So I recommend doing that if you really don't want to do short rows.
If you find your way to the forums and into our conversation about the knit along, you can find the swatch pattern that I've developed, which includes both written instructions for the short rows as used in the Phrancko sweater, along with a little video where I explain most of the techniques. Okay.
But it doesn't matter what kind of short row we use, correct?
Most everything in the sweater is completely customizable in terms of technique you use. Really, the only thing that I wouldn't consider optional is using a very firm cast on when you cast on stitches for the neck. The cable cast on is called for, and they wouldn't change that because it's the structure of what the sweater hangs on. Everything else you can replace with a technique that you're comfortable with. If you don't like wrap and turns, you can do German short rows, Japanese short rows. You could leave a hole there. No one will stop you. You should see the crop top that I made. It's full of holes. So yes, that you can choose whichever technique you're comfortable with for most of the sweater. And Frank does have suggestions in the pattern and instructions for the techniques that he advises you use, but he won't come for you if you choose to do something else. So I do want to talk a little bit about what it looks like to pick up the stitches from the back for the front of the sweater. These stitches are picked up purl-wise, yes? And it may be a little difficult for you to see the anatomy of what it looks like. So let's take a look at my fronts or my backs and how you pick up stitches for the fronts. I'm getting myself confused, but I think that's what I mean. So this is a very early thing you do, and it is nearing the end of where the sweater is knit flat. What have I done with my swatch? Well, I've made a mess of myself, and now, here it is. I know you guys all saw it before because it was right here, which means it can't have gone far. All right, this is my back. Do you all see it? It's teeny tiny because it's for that mysterious John Doe baby. And these are where I'm going to be picking up the stitches. Oh, I have not placed a right side marker, but that is, and not right side as in correct side, right side as in the literal, you wear it on your right shoulder. You'll find in the instructions that there's advice to place a marker on the right side because right and left are referenced a bit in this first section, and it's very easy to get confused. But I haven't done it, so I'm confused. So here are the stitches we're going to be picking up into, but we're going to be picking them up purlwise from this side, which can be a little bit difficult to see. But luckily, since we've knit that first row, you can kind of open up your cast on row and see the stitches in there. Can you see them?
Mhm.
In case you can't, I've prepared some graphics. Do you want to see my graphics? I'm proud of myself, so I'm going to show them to you. And I click share screen. Do you see my graphic?
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah, we
wonderful.
do.
So that's a little drawing of basically what I just showed you. That's the cast on edge, and those are the backs of the stitches that you'll be purling into, which can be difficult to see, particularly if you're using a fine yarn. So let's take a look at one way you can do. I'm so pleased. So once you've got your knitting there ready to go, ready to insert to purl, you may find it's easiest to sort of flop the knitting over, because now you can see the V's on the correct side and insert your needle as I've shown in this diagram. I will put a PDF of this diagram up in the forum in case you want to look at it again. In my opinion, this is really the trickiest part of the very beginning of the sweater, because it can be difficult for you to find exactly where you're sticking the needle. The pattern as written calls for the stitches to be picked up in the center of each stitch, which will cause a visible join at the top of the shoulder that I guarantee you will not matter. You might find that in other constructions and other sweaters, it's advised to pick up between the stitches, so it appears that you get a continuous series of knitting columns. It's true, that does look lovely. This gives you something that some knitting writers refer to as the dreaded 11s, which I find don't matter much. And I think Frank found that it was simply an easier matter to pick up in the stitches, because then you don't have to worry about everything being offset by half a stitch. If you don't know why that would be, don't worry about it for now, but this is where you're picking up in the center of the V. Do you have anything to say about that, Frank?
Yes, also if you pick up between the stitches, you'll have one less stitch on the front than you had on the back, because the in-betweens, it's like I've got 4 fingers up, but I only have three spaces between them. And so that's the way it would be. It's important to also pick up a stitch in each selvage edge. Those are stitches. They don't look like V's.
I'm going to show that in my next slide.
Good. So don't miss the selvage edge.
So,
and so
yes, the selvage is not visible on this slide because I wanted to have a word about them, because selvages are confusing. So Frank brings up a good point. This is actually a drawing of my selvages as they appeared. Selvages look frightful. Selvages generally across the board look frightful because there's nothing holding on to them. So it can be difficult to see where the selvage stitch is that you're picking up to on the edges. If I ignored the selvages, I'd have 2 fewer stitches than I need. So here's how you can look at the anatomy of your bit of knitting. and make sure you find the salvages. Oh, I keep pressing the wrong thing to scroll forward. So these are the pearl bumps caused by my longtail cast on. There's a stitch coming out of each one of those, including the two on the selvage. If you see the one on the all the way to the left, that's the left, particularly bad looking selvage stitch, right? There are two strands coming out of each of those pearl bumps, and those are the stitches. So if you get a little lost in your selvages, just take a look for the cast on pearl bumps and follow them over to the selvages. Look for the two strands coming out of those pearl bumps and pick up right in the middle of those. I hope that will help you navigate your way around. If you haven't done much picking up of stitches, starting right off the bat with picking up purl-wise could be daunting for you. So I wanted to present some ways to make that not so daunting for you. And I hope it helps. Let me see. Where am I? Ah, I'm back.
Ron, let me just say, somebody asked privately, so I think it's important to say to everyone, if you want to see the speaker full screen, which would mostly be Ron speaking, you would choose speaker view by going to your upper right corner of your Zoom window, and where you see it saying view, you click there and change from gallery view to speaker view. And then you'll see whoever is speaking full screen instead of seeing everyone and having Ron be just a little tiny window.
I see that message now as well. I'm sorry that I missed that.
That's quite all right. I took care of it.
So those are, I guess, my tips for this first section, the fronts and backs. Next week, we'll come in with some tips for the picking up on the edges and beginning to work in the round. But the two things to take away from this are, A, make it easy on yourself when you're picking up those stitches, turn it around and look at them from the front. And there are plenty of opportunities to be creative and use the techniques you want to use in this sweater. I would not use the cable cast on as a time to be creative with which cast on. It's pretty integral to having the sweater stay up on the shoulders. And it's specifically prescribed for a reason. Yep. We've got about 10 minutes left in the meeting today. So I want us to have a chance to answer any questions you might have now, orient you to where you can find more information. So if anything has come up, or if you have anything for Frank in general, let's hear it.
Are there videos of the cable cast on out there?
Hundreds.
Do you have one, Frank?
Yeah. If you look at my swatch pattern, it has examples, videos of all of the techniques that you use in the Phrancko sweater in that swatch pattern, with videos, with a long video. But of course, there are many excellent videos about the cable cast on. If anyone has any recommendations, you know your favorite online knitting instructors, I'm sure many of them have videos about it. And you can also, if you have a suggestion, put it in the forums. But yes, the pattern I have has instructions about the cable cast on.
And that's found in the forum, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okie dokie.
Anyone else?
Ron, I also posted the link to your swatch tutorial in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. Hey, look, there it is. So yes, on YouTube, you can find the swatch tutorial. I hope some of you have had a chance to take a look at that. And if not, it still exists. And it contains a link down in the description to the Twisted Skeins webpage, where you can download the swatch pattern, a PDF. I've also put that in the Phrancko forums.
Great. Thank you, Ron.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Okay. Well, if
I would think that perhaps you have, we didn't talk about what their homework might be, Ron, but I
Yeah.
have some suggestions you might want
Yes.
to add to it. But I would suggest that over the next week, you get the yarn that you're going to use for a sweater that you really want to complete. We don't really suggest you complete the baby sweater. It's really a practice sweater. But if you want to complete a sweater, get at least one skein of the yarn and knit a 5 by 5 inch swatch, and take your swatch measurements, take your measurements, and then generate a pattern that for yourself or for whoever you're going to knit for, using that yarn and those needles, and get all the way up to, but don't purchase it. Just get all the way up to the place where you can see the schematic and get an estimate for the number of skeins that you will need to purchase of that yarn. And so that would be a good place to be when we start next week, I think. So we know everybody at least knows how to generate a pattern and has done it successfully. And if anybody isn't able to do that, we'll answer their questions next week. How's that sound, Ron?
That sounds great. I just sent Sumner a message that was private that I didn't mean to. I'm sending it to everyone. If you do want, if you're getting yarn, if you want yarn recommendations, if you want to borrow yarn, I will shamelessly plug my own shop. There's my email in the chat. You can send me an email for advice, recommendations, things I've used successfully to make sweaters, or more examples. And I would love to help you. That's my contact info.
And I just knitted a hat with one of Ron's yarns, and it was absolutely lovely. I loved working with it.
I'm so glad.
Just I can give you a plug.
I appreciate it. So yeah, if you're working the baby pattern, if you have your own pattern now, take a stab at knitting those front or backs, picking up the fronts. It can look a little confusing because you have a lot of loose tails and you're using 2 balls for a tiny amount of time. So you have to do some uncrossing if you're not careful. Give that a try. If you run into any issues, absolutely post about it in the forums. If you run into any amazing successes, please also post those in the forums. Photos will be great. The joy of a knit along is knitting along. And next week, we'll deal with any questions you have about the website as you look at the pattern generation process, and picking up in the selvages to begin knitting in the round.
Okay.
I'm just going to sit here and look at you all. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you again, Frank, for entertaining me in this way.
I think it's wonderful, and I'm really happy that you're all here. And I hope you continue meeting with us as you continue working on your Phrancko sweaters, even after the baby sweater kit knit along is completed. It's really been fun to meet with a group of people every week and share our progress on the sweaters.
Yeah. I should say that even if now's not the time that you want to start even the baby sweater, you're more than welcome to continue coming and listening to people's questions and answers and watching the tutorials and following along, because you'll want to start it at some point maybe. So, you know, you're not required to be like, show us your knitting so you can be here. Someone raising their hand?
Kay Baker, your hand is up.
Hi, I apologize. I've been out and I just came in and I'm just catching the last few minutes. Is this recorded?
Yes, it is. And I will put it on YouTube, and I will put the link to the recording on the forum. There's a forum just for Zoom meetings and the KAL, and I'll put the link to this there.
Thank you so much. Oh God, I'm like, oh
no. Well, I'm glad you made it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I hope we'll have a great time working on this. I mean, really, I'm a broken record, but I can't recommend the Phrancko system enough. Just the website, the method, it's all just like a total package. It's so cool, and I get pretty enthusiastic about these things. So I hope you're all enthusiastic too, because it's great. In the forum, you can also look at people's projects that they've posted. And there are some really great ones. Those of you who came here from Suzanne's classes, you might have seen the sweaters that Frank shared. Can you recommend a site for taking measurements? Maybe so. Let's if I can find a good recommendation, a nice tutorial for taking those measurements, or if anyone else has one that they can think of offhand, let's put a taking measurements suggestion in the forum, because we're about out of time for now, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know that there are great tutorials out there. So,
Oh, and Suzanne's first Suzanne's first live stream, first couple of live streams talks about measurements and body types.
There you go.
Her live stream for this iTag cis that she's doing, the set-in sleeve.
Thank you.
So take a look at that on YouTube, because those were recorded also.
I will remind you as you take measurements, particularly if you are busty, the standard recommendation for full bust will not apply here. Measure your upper chest, right under the armpits, and any measurement video you might find out there might not mention that, but it's kind of peculiar to this particular knitting system. So upper chest, upper chest, upper chest.
Thank you, Sue, for posting the link for Suzanne's.
I was going to do.
Well, she's fast.
She is.
I might say that I got that idea for the upper chest measurement from Amy Herzog, who also does a custom fit sweater on her website.
There you have it. All right, I suppose it's time for me to get back to the work of running a yarn store. Send me an email if you need anything. Post in the forums. I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Bye-bye, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Frank. Thanks, Ron.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Until next time. There they go. Bye-bye. Oh, Cindy's gone. I was going to ask her a question, but she left. All right. Well, enjoy your time away, Frank.
Thanks. I'll be coming home tomorrow.
Are you traveling for fun? Are you?
Yes, just for fun.
vacating?
Just got away for the weekend. We planned this weeks ago before you started talking about doing a KAL. I might have stayed home if I realized I was going to have this important meeting today. But anyway, it went well. Did you have anything you wanted to suggest?
No.
Or we can talk later if you want.
I feel like I'm definitely a wall of information, but in an hour.
Between the two of us, I think we bombarded everybody.
Yeah.
With a lot of information.
I'll try.
Okay.
All right. See you next time. Have
See ya.
fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.